Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Yay! Here we are.
Look at the shades on that guy, huh?
Yeah, I wonder why he's wearing those.
He's got like Terminator-looking shades. Well, you know, they're probably a lot more expensive.
They probably are, for sure. Yeah.
So this statement is definitely a statement won't make you, warm and fuzzy, or maybe it would make you warm and fuzzy.
Well, yeah, ultimately in a literal sense.
Yeah, and you see this quote, "Everybody will be turned to radioactive ash." And the headline says, Putin warns against NATO's interference in war against the Ukraine. 3 days away from the holiday and all. As we speak, about 175,000 Russian combat forces are close to the Ukrainian border. And so you have this media mogul head that's known as Putin's mouthpiece, Dmitry Kiselov, saying basically put a gun to America's head if NATO's forces are stationed in Ukraine, and warned the alliance to back off, otherwise everybody will be turned into radioactive ash.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's quite a statement there. But as we've gotten from the guides, the Galactics wouldn't let that happen on the planet.
No, they're not going to. That's one thing they draw the line with.
And then, people have said, well, why did they allow Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
It was my understanding that that's something that they were not prepared for. I know it sounds like, well, the Galactic Federation, they should be ready for everything, but every entity has the ability to misjudge, and that was something that was very tragic, and they're not going to let it happen again.
I think the thing for us to realize too is as above, so below. And, there's technology and, much greater understanding how the universe works on the higher densities. The higher up you go, the greater the knowledge base, the experience base, but it doesn't make you perfect. And especially when you're trying to allow free will and allow things to play out without interfering. We get to that Star Trek rule, the big Star Trek rule, right? Hey, we observe these cultures, we could observe them, but we're not to interfere. And, the benevolent beings, they do basically live by them. Mm-hmm. Of course, they don't want to see the death of a planet.
No, absolutely not. And they are watching, they are ready, and they're here to help us evolve and not let us get super distracted by a lot of these external issues, but to help us evolve.
Another thing that I'd like to give to you guys is an understanding that I've come to just recently, really, in that you have these beings on higher densities, but in some ways they don't have the ability to operate in this lower density to the extreme that we might think they could, because they're on a higher density. The densities are, again, they're kind of like radio channels as you're flicking through, and one comes out of focus, the other one comes into focus. And so they can operate through us to a degree. They can help us to hone our abilities, understand our own powers, our own abilities to change the reality on this plane of existence. But it's really us that are here on this plane. Mm-hmm. So we are the ones that can have the greatest effect on this plane. That's something that I don't think people maybe understand.
No, people think that there's an external force that might come out and help us out, but unfortunately, the force that's going to help us starts within us, right within us. If we take good care of ourselves, we're able to take good care of our loved ones. If we take good care of our loved ones will take good care of them. And then it extends out. Like, we are the pebble in the pond. We are the most important ones to take care of, because from that stems everything else automatically.
Yeah, you look to the Hopi prophecy and, the warriors of the Rainbow Warriors, those that are gonna come and emerge on this planet from every different race, creed, nationality, all different backgrounds, unifying and coming together, and we are the ones that we are waiting for. So again, when you see people saying, wait for Jesus to come back, he's going to set them straight. That's the programmer's programming, because again, then it's taking the power out of your hands, and you're saying, I'm going to trust God's going to straighten this out, or Jesus is going to straighten this out. But it's not the case. It's not the case, and it's again what we have in these times as a belief system, not necessarily what was the belief system, say, 50 years after Yeshua walked the earth. There was a lot of different beliefs. They got stomped out, totally stomped out. Everything got toasted. Book burnings, like we have our internet book burnings now. And, the power structure changed everything completely. It's always about that keeping control. Now, when some people might look biblically and say, well, look at Sodom and Gomorrah, and think that it was the creator of this particular universe that did that, but it wasn't. Again, this is, the beings that are in control here and now that are doing these things and playing themselves off to be God with the big G, source, or the Elohim. The true Elohim are basically creator God beings of a very, very high vibrational frequency. It's not Enlil, it's not Enki, it's not the Ijiji, it's not any of the Anunnaki, it's not the Greys, it's not the Draco. They always portray themselves as what they are not. They try to usurp their power. They want you to worship them. They do trick people into worshiping them and giving your energy, your power to the ones that are oppressing you in the first place. Mm-hmm. That's one of the biggest tricks they do.
Yes, and they're very, very good at it. And because they know us, we are very predictable. So when we go along with the mainstream information, that's what makes us predictable. When we start to peel away, however, and start to think on our own, that's where we can get caught up in traps to get ourselves pulled back into this matrix. But we have to be vigilant and strong and stay out of the mainstream and just continually work on that sovereignty.
People that have been kidnapped, for instance, or prisoners of war that are brutally tortured time and time again, they could actually end up developing this syndrome where they start looking at their abusers, their captors, in a positive way and start to want to please them. Mm-hmm. It's insanity, but this is the type of techniques that they use. And again, they get us to say, not my will, but your will be done. That's what they're banking on. That's what they've done to us time and time again. They get us to give our power away. So we might think, well, the archangels can protect us. Well, yeah, if we call them in, they can't help but beings of an etheric nature. Can they stop a bullet? Maybe in some ways, in some, form. Perhaps they could influence something to get in between. Perhaps they could influence you to all of a sudden trip and drop.
Yeah.
Or the shooter, to all of a sudden get the sun in his eye and misses, these type of things, yes. But when you're looking at the big event, the cataclysmic events that we've seen, really it's the beings that are in the density that we are in right now, the beings in a particular density that have the most power to affect that density. So this is where, yes, they can help, but to an extent. But Absolutely. They can help.
Yeah, we can keep that in mind with the benevolent ones, but, just as they can help us on our path, the not so benevolent ones can also distract us too. So that's why we want our strong spiritual practice to stay close to the benevolent ones, and that way we can hear them. We can hear them more often than not with that strong practice.
And, here is again one of those little mysteries that many of you probably understand. We are multidimensional. So right now, if you're wide awake, operating on 3D at the moment, perhaps you're already actually in 4D, consciously. Some people are making that transition and will be making that transition. And then when you're sleeping, you're in 4D. Eventually, we will be moving up to 5D, those that avoid certain things, because there are certain things that are completely being implemented to make it as hard as possible for beings to get up into that 5D zone, because then you got the get out of jail free pass, and you're no longer under the influence of certain power structures that have been on this planet and are on this planet for at least the last 5,000 years in this current Kali Yuga. But there's still a portion of you that's operating in the higher densities. Thus, we are multidimensional. Your highest self might be residing in 6th or 7th density. Very, very high density that is heading towards just pure consciousness. As you go up the densities, everything gets to be more just pure consciousness, pure energy, less physicality. Although, to the beings on that density, things might appear to be just as solid as they appear to be to us, just as real.
Right.
Again, so just to reiterate, we are the ones that we're waiting for.
We are.
It's up to us, and yet they can help us. They can guide us. They can most definitely help bring our frequency up, and as each person's frequency moves upwards, the whole frequency of the planet moves up.
Right. Exactly. But we have to be open to it.
If we look to the leadership that's been on the planet, it acts like a nasty virus or a cancer upon the planet itself. So again, the more people that are getting out of that sort of frequency, vibration, and viewpoint, because it is a viewpoint, and when we think about it, you could even look again biblically and say, well, hey, we were given dominion over all the birds and the fish and the animals, plants. We could do whatever we want. That's not the way the indigenous people around the globe view things. Look at what this has done to our society. Look at what it's done to the planet. Look at all the mass die-offs, the deaths. We see this all the time. Birds dropping out of the sky, fish, dolphins, whales, just ending up on the beaches dead, tons of plastic all, tied up through their guts. It's an atrocity, and the system is an atrocity. Indigenous people knew that they are just a cell in the body of the earth, and so they truly tried to live in a symbiotic relationship and peace and harmony. Which, when we're talking about that last statement, turning everything into radioactive ash, you can't get any less harmonious than that.
Right. No, you really can't. It's what they do is they just take everything and turn it upside down and do everything artificially that's done naturally, and it's really sad.
So basically, this is out of RT speaking about the Whitehouse reveals if it has aggressive intent towards Russia, which of course they say they don't. But then at the same time, it's interesting because there's reports that have come out that says that U.S. military contractors were preparing for maybe a fake banner. What's another word for a banner? 4 letters, starts with an F, ends in a G. A technique that's been used going back, for over, hundreds of years probably now. A lot of that's out in the open now. We understand, things like, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, the sinking of Lusitania, even perhaps the sinking of the Titanic, which, there were some very influential men on that boat that were all talking about the banking industry and changes going on there. So we know these things do happen, and we know, very well that might be the way things get started. Just another fake banner event.
Right, exactly.
And so lots of buzz about that. And meanwhile, we have Israel that wants to move on Iran because Iran is very close to developing the same sort of weaponry that we're talking about again, though Israel does have that weaponry themselves. And they are trying to openly try to get the U.S. to back them in stopping Iran. And again, that could be another flashpoint. There's so many different spots where we could have things happen. So it's official that it was a sonic boom from a jet that caused that mysterious boom. What else would we say? You know, that's what it was. And it's interesting because I've seen comments from people in many different areas getting the same thing. We talked about Michigan too, but other areas around the globe where people are noticing an increase in activity. And we felt it too. We felt one too out of the blue, and I think I felt another one earlier today again. Lots of interesting activity. It all definitely feels like there's preparation underway for bigger conflict, which many people can see happening. And without a doubt, places, especially big cities in certain areas, are getting less and less safe as we see a U.S. Congresswoman was hijacked at gunpoint in South Philadelphia. This is Rep. Mary Gay Scanlon. She wasn't physically harmed, but her car and her possessions were taken at 2:45 p.m. in the day. A lot of different things going on out there in certain areas. You know, we've seen all sorts of chaos in some cities, and over here in Chicago, we got the mayor not threatening about crime or anything, but, you know, threatening those that have not lived up to the dates for men. Yeah. If you have been living, let's say, dateless, your time is up. Wow. You know, just stark, blunt, to the point. And we were sharing with, again, a family member. Hey, Janet.
Hey, Janet.
Who's debating which direction to go and looking to get a little bit farther away from the big cities where she is, and we have been talking about this for quite a while. There are some rays of hope and some bastions of freedom, so to speak, with certain states that have chosen to be a little more vocal about the rights of their citizens. Again, you got to listen to your guides and go within, you know, because each of us has a unique path to take.
Yes, we do. We all have to go within, and it keeps circling back to that spiritual practice that we keep harping on. But we know how important it is. We know how it helps us through our days. You know, people ask a lot, how do you guys, you know, look at all this news and deliver this information and stay positive? Well, it's not easy, but it's easier when you have a practice.
So, you know, we see in number 46, or is it number 46?
Right.
If you read this whole article, pointing out why do they have a set? Why are they doing a set? You know, it's because it's fake. It's not the Casablanca. It's not the real Casablanca. You know what I mean there? And you got fake container ships in the background.
Yeah.
What is up with that?
This is a little awkward.
What is up with that? I mean, is it like they got to give you a little disclosure? You know, there's fake container ships with fake PCC troops in them.
Right. Yes.
You can't make this stuff up. It's so bizarre at times that it makes you think that we are living in a script, you know, and so we've often talked about that mark of the BEAST, which is so obviously something that is being carried out completely according to the script. It's just more than obvious, and yet you got these type of things. Why would they have on this movie set, or whatever it is? So what number is this? Is this number 3? Is this number 6? Is this number 7? You know, because they all do look quite a bit different at times, and some seem more irritable than others. You know, so is it because they have them in different places? You know, is this being filmed in a Hollywood studio? Maybe it's being filmed in Beijing. Oh boy. That could be trouble.
Yep.
So for those that are hoping, well, student debt loans have been delayed again, but not canceled. So anybody with student debt out there, you might have been getting notifications. You're going to be due to restart come January. Going to be due to restart. Well, now it's extended to May 1st, 2022. And it'll be interesting to see what is going on in the world at that point. 2022 is going to be a wild one.
It's going to be a zinger, guys.
It is. And talking about zingers, well, we got a 6.0 over here off the Mexican coast. And, you know, I think it's interesting because we've learned from watching Dutch since for, well, we haven't really watched them much in the past year or two, but, you know, haven't watched them in the past. And the way he teaches how the energy moves, well, this is perfectly in line. And if we had a 6.2 here, it would make perfect sense that you'd have a 6.0 down off the coast of Guadalajara. So looks like an energy transference there. And the guides did say look for something of that magnitude within 3 days. Yeah. So it looks to be moving down. And another, there have been, I've seen some reports like documenting hundreds, if not thousands, of elite level athletes of all sorts of ages. This one's 32, Olympic diver. Got a lung infection, was in the hospital, got a lung infection, and died. If this person's, you know, people in this type of shape can succumb to things that seem really, for past years, unusual, then what about the average person? You know, and I know, you know, there's a question that everybody's going to be asking. They don't answer it in this article, but there are some you know, websites that are keeping track of these things. So let's send our prayers to him. I mean, just another.
Very unfortunate, and it just keeps happening.
Every day there's another elite level athlete gone. You know, I was just reading yesterday a guy that was 27 and in MMA, mixed martial arts, and making his way up, was hoping to get to one of the bigger shows like Bellator or UFC, and he's gone out of the blue. Again, they didn't have an explanation for what took him, but you know, sometimes things strike suddenly and they're mysterious, and sometimes they strike in bunches.
So unfortunate, yeah.
Very much so. Exquisitely preserved embryo, 70 million year old egg, dinosaur egg, with the skeleton still intact. So
yeah,
my thought originally, can they get some DNA, or are they gonna, you know, put it in an ostrich and see what happens?
I know. I was thinking, first thing I'm thinking, here's the beginning of another good movie.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because the position it's in is a position that birds typically go into, you know, a few days before they're born. And so this little baby yin liang is about 11 inches long, and it's fascinating. And you think about the size of the dinosaurs, right? They were massive. Not all of them. Some were the size of chickens, you know. But yes, there were dinosaurs that were, you know, as long as a tractor trailer. But the Earth had a lot more O2 in those days. The Earth was a very, very different place in those days. As we see, a fossil, right, reveals giant millipedes as long as cars. Can you imagine millipedes, bugs as long as cars? In northern England.
I thought that was so cool.
Isn't that amazing? Yep. Just discovered by fluke on a UK beach. Yeah, that's amazing. 326 million year old fossils. Again, so they say. And of course, many have doubts about these lengths of time, although I seriously don't think the Earth is 6,000 years old. But that's an obvious reference to the Kali Yuga when we look at that, because that is kind of like when the darkness came in, really about 5,000 years ago, 5,100 according to some sources. Air bubbles in Antarctic ice point to cause of oxygen decline. Well, They say it was glacial erosion that likely caused atmospheric oxygen levels to dip over the past 800,000 years. Well, that's interesting too, because it was about 780,000 years ago that we had the last full magnetic pole reversal that stayed. So could that have anything to do with that as well? Because obviously O2 levels drop drastically when we have those reversals, and some even have doubts that anything could very hardly survive because of the lack of O2 at a certain time point when the poles are going to flip. Only in certain areas, like you want to be within a certain degree of the equator when that happens. Well, I could definitely tell you after living at 7,500 feet in New Mexico for a while that there's a lot less oxygen there than there is at sea level.
Yeah, then
That's
you can sure
noticeable.
appreciate the other.
Yeah, so imagine globally, like if sea level was like 12,000 feet. But then again, there's some Denisovan genes in people in Tibet that have helped them adapt to living even at 14,000 feet. So life will find a way.
It does. It always does.
And here we have the Eye of the Sahara and the lost city of Atlantis. And many people are aware probably of this, which is over there in northwestern Africa. And so some have said that, well, maybe part of Africa is actually Atlantis. Well, Atlantis was a global civilization. What we've gotten from the guides was Atlantis was most definitely a very interesting civilization in that you had people that were living a Stone Age type of life on Earth, and then you had people living a more high-tech life than we have now. But we do have people still in the Stone Age, with some of the tribes in the Amazon and some different Aboriginal people, that are living a very simple life, totally living as best they can in harmony with the earth.
Yeah, totally their choice, and they're just trying to hold on to that as long as possible.
Yeah, so it's fascinating to dig into all these things, and as we've shared with you guys, some that were there at the fall of Atlantis when everything really just crashed and went to hell are here in politics today. As we speak. I mean, we're not kidding you. We're not joking. They've basically reincarnated and they're going through it again.
It's something that they choose to do because they know the system, they know how it works. It's something that it's almost like that back and forth rivalry, and they just continue on and on and on.
Yeah. And so, what we have gotten is many of these cast of characters that we see, they were here then, and they're here now. And we've shared that, for instance, Rand Paul is one that is trying to help alleviate the chaos that happened last time from happening again. But again, they can only do so much, because if they truly overstep certain bounds, it's not that they wouldn't even be walking the planet anymore. It might be that there's nobody else in their immediate family that would be either, so to speak. So it's interesting. But yeah, Rand Paul, DeSantis, even NP, yes, the speaker.
Yes.
Although, obviously some of these people are very well used to being on opposite sides, and their battle seems to be eternal in some ways.
It does, and hers seems to stay on that part of always trying to get more control. That's very important to her. For her, she'll come back just to do that because she's so vengeful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know you guys could figure out who we're talking about there, and if not, I'm sure there's going to be a million comments where people will let you know. So the Irish Celtic Festival of Winter Solstice, Newgrange, and the longest night of the year. Nature says that beginnings are in the dark. Life first is dreamed and then vibrates in the absence of light. Interesting. Many of you might have seen Zeitgeist. And Zeitgeist talked about how there were so many other dying and resurrection saviors, so to speak, and how it's really referencing the sun. And what happens, at the winter solstice is for 3 days, it's almost like the sun kind of stands still as it reverses. The planet's actually doing the shifting, as we are kind of like a top spinning.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of reach a peak, and then it starts coming back around the other way. And so that's what we have. But what's interesting is that this is a time, I almost don't want to say that phrase, but you could view it as a time when the veil is thin, where we can affect a lot of positive change in this world. It's a time for setting our intentions. And it's fascinating too. This article talks about this one particular site that's over 5,000 years old. In the bronze, the silver, and also in the golden ages, we have a lot more knowledge about really how things work. There's a lot less subterfuge. There's a lot less systems in place to take us down, rabbit holes that lead to nowhere. Lead us off on red herrings. There's a million red herrings. As soon as somebody figures something out, there's a red herring put in place to get you chasing your tail like a dog, chasing its tail going nowhere. But when we get out of this dark age, there's less and less and less of that. And we can look, and we're encouraged to look at these people that made these different amazing structures in perfect alignment with stars. We're looking at the Great Pyramid. There's doubt now about Stonehenge and its dating, and even if it was even there. But there's so many other structures, Puma Punku. We could go look all down through South America and Peru. We could look at some of the other pyramids in Mesoamerica, all around the globe. Adam's calendar, and everything is aligned astrologically. Why? Well, one of the big reasons is they want to know when the Kali Yuga is coming. Mm-hmm. They want to know when to prepare for the darkness that's coming, and when to also know when the light's going to start to come back.
Right. Very, very important information too. When they understand consciousness and they understand the sun and they understand shadows, they understand the importance of the symbiotic nature of everything. That would be so wonderful if we all started out life knowing that and understanding. We would be so much further advanced than we are now. But the good news is stuff is seeping out now, so we can take a hold of that. And now we have choices.
In Irish Gaelic, solstice is Grianstad, which literally translates as sun stop. And, then that gets you thinking about the 3 days of darkness. We're always off chasing these things. You get the new date. Oh, it's going to be 3 days of darkness now, or 10 days of darkness, or whatever. It's coming. Watch. There's going to be all these videos coming out on it, and they're going to tell you it's coming in January.
Yeah.
And then when January comes, it's coming in March.
Every month.
It's like we could follow these things. Again, rabbit holes that lead to nowhere. But just, it's like a labyrinth. Let's just keep getting you going off the wrong, course in a labyrinth.
And they, most definitely keep you busy doing everything that you don't need to be doing.
What we need to be doing is going in and developing our own intuitive abilities. So we can't have the wool pulled over our eyes in the first place. Mm-hmm. So, as we've said, the present time period, the Kali Yuga, according to some, started at sunrise on the 24th of January, 3102 BC. And so, we have, basically 5,123 years of Kali Yuga right now that we are into. And that times with the leaving of Krishna. And, after Krishna left, everything changed. And again, Krishna is thought to be an incarnation of Vishnu. Vishnu is the preserver, typically, But in Vaishnavism, he's also the actual creator of this particular universe. What we have is the end of this dark age, and we're starting to get our foot ready to step into the next age, Bronze Age, whatever we want to call it, where the light starts to return, just like with the 3 days. Right now, it's kind of like we're in that period right now, where it's almost like a pause. The rest of this system must collapse. The control that's on the planet must and it will collapse. And really, honestly, the first topic we talked about, the prospects of a WW hashtag number 3, is one of the things that the guides have said happens right at the end of the period. And because, again, we've gone through this cycle countless times. Well, not necessarily all the souls all the time. There's always souls ascending and leaving, this whole area totally. Some souls going off and having incarnations in totally different planets, totally different solar systems, totally different star systems. Because truly, we're not bound in that sense. And that gets into karma, also gets into free will and what the souls plan for their next, journey and incarnation. And we will get into more depth in upcoming videos with that. But what they really want us to tell you guys is to hold your vision for yourself personally, and then also for this world, of what you want to see manifest, because the dark forces are doing that for sure. And they're tricking many people into also holding that vision that the dark forces want to manifest for the upcoming year, and also the remainder of the Kali Yuga.
Right. I mean, it's a very fertile time, a really important time to hold that vision for the earth, hold that vision for yourself and your family, and you kind of take that, and then as the sun goes into that vision and makes it brighter and brighter and brighter, it helps that grow. So they want us to be doing that during these 3 days while the sun is, at its lowest point, so that we can have this vision as we move into 2022. And we know it's going to be difficult, but it doesn't have to be that difficult. It can change.
Absolutely. So, basically focus strongly on what you want to achieve this year. And whatever that is, I would heartily, strongly recommend that a regular spiritual practice be at the basis of that. In whatever way you want to practice. So many of the quote unquote pagan traditions, again, are traditions that are found all over the globe. And there's a reason. And so it's so interesting that in the time of the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, that these things are viewed with a negative tendency by those that profess belief systems of the majority. But again, if the belief systems of the majority are in fact the belief systems of the controllers, then that gives you all the explanation you need. And when we're looking to what was held in reverence in other ages that are not the Dark Age, those thoughts, those traditions are put down in this, but in reality, there's probably a good reason for them. And again, it's being in harmony with the earth, being in harmony with every other being that's on the planet, in the planet, and in the other densities, because they do pay attention to these things in the higher densities. But unfortunately for the masses, they don't understand this because they're disconnected, because they've been drinking fluoridated water, eating all sorts of food with toxins, and been bathed in EMF and frequencies that cloud the mind and the senses, as well as their other PRE script, IONS, right?
Yep.
All these things add up to blur the mind, cloud judgment, and cut us off from each other, the planet, the cosmos, and source.
To them, it's a perfect plan, as long as they keep us in the dark.
Most definitely. So, again, this is a time for reflection. This is a time for intention. And if you haven't done it, it's a good idea to journal.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. One of the things that got me so that I would remember my dreams was as soon as I'd wake up and write them on down. And it was like 6 years after the fact that I looked in a journal from September 11th, 2000, and saw that I had dreamed of 2 planes crashing into the Trade Centers. I didn't remember that dream, but I wrote it down, and then it shocked the crap out of me that the guides had showed me that it was going to happen a year before it did happen, to the day. So that was mind-blowing. But I've had many of those type of experiences, but if I didn't jot it down, I wouldn't remember.
It's a really good way to reaffirm to yourself about your abilities, that your abilities are coming in, because the brain tends to want to just dismiss everything as coincidence. But if you start a journal and you start to write things down, you go back and you look at that periodically, time to time, you'll start to see how far your abilities have come.
Absolutely. So, and again, it's just a matter of prioritizing as much as possible. Time for meditation, time for Qigong, time for yoga, all these wonderful practices. And again, if there was one practice that I would keep, if I couldn't do anything else, it would actually be the mantras, because they are just picking up a phone to the higher densities. And, I remember, it's just mind-blowing to be able to do the mantras and then feel them, feel the beings coming, and pure love, pure benevolence. And yet so many are conditioned to fear beings from other traditions because it's not the one that you were brought up in, even when the tradition that perhaps we were brought up in is really a construct in order to keep us, again, following a red herring, going on the wrong track in the labyrinth, and just keeping us disconnected. So hopefully others will pick up on this and start to develop that, because the energies that are hitting us with the photon belt, they're changing us. They're taking people that would normally not be thought of as gifted in this certain light, and it's going to make it so you would be, by other ages, very gifted. Just what we can do now is just amazing compared to just decades ago. And what you can achieve in a practice like Qigong, for instance, that might have taken you 20 years to make so much progress, you could now literally probably make that same progress in under a year, maybe even just a matter of months. Time well spent.
Very much.
So please do check out the playlist also for meditation and Qigong and mantras and yoga.
Yep.
And thank you, everybody, that's supporting us on Patreon and Ko-Fi. We couldn't do it without you. Do check out Medicinal Foods. There's a link at the top of every video. May you guys be blessed with abundant peace, light, health, happiness in this upcoming year that is shortly going to be upon us. God bless and namaste.
Namaste.